Hello, my name is Julian Carrington, and I'm a programmer with Planet in Focus, and it is my pleasure to be joined for a Q&A by Heather Hatch, who is the director of Wochiigii, End of the Piece. Heather, thank you for your important film and for making time to speak with us.
Thanks for having me, actually.
It's our pleasure. Maybe to begin with, I just can touch on the origins of the project. And I know that obviously you live in Western Canada and that you're from Vancouver originally. So I imagine that you've been aware of the Sightsee project for some time. But I'm wondering, at what point did you decide you wanted to become involved in order to amplify the communities who were fighting the project?
I guess the simplest answer would just be I felt like it wasn't right, that nobody was listening. The simplest answer. And then I had worked with a poet, Helen Knott, from the area at the beginning of understanding films and poetry videos. And it was her social media that caught my attention and intrigued me to dig into it.
Mm. And so what was your process of getting to know the people involved in the story and kind of deciding how to frame your take on it? I know that your ancestry is Haida rather than West Moberly, but it's clear that your ties to the community are quite strong, and I'm sure those developed over the course of production. But I'm wondering what that initial process was of sort of cultivating that relationship, getting to know those folks, and deciding how to go about telling the story.
I think initially it was my working relationship with Helen Knott. We applied together for funding, and then she did drop off the project. So I had to, I wanted to keep going. And my first relationship was with an elder named Della Owens from the Soto Nation. And that's the original name of the film is Della and Goliath. So I spoke with her for a very long time before I started filming over the phone, and it sort of built a lot of the structure of the story that you see, in a sense. But over time, I filmed with her for a bit, and then I just went to events that were happening, like the Paddle for the Pieces or the protests. And I was talking to the Treaty 8 tribal office, which is where I met Diane Abel, who's the main character of the film now. And I often say that interview you see in the film is the very first time I met her. Was
oh, wow.
Yeah. So there was a lot of I feel like chemistry, synergy, grace that was there, and it's my relationship that I built with her over the period of time that really gives the film its community voice.
Yeah, I think that really comes through. And so is that those events, is that where you also would have met Chief Wilson?
Yeah, I would just pop up and start and ask him for interviews a lot. I'm not sure if to this day he's very committed to speaking for his nation and doing what they wish. So he's pretty, that's where I met him. Sorry.
Okay. And is there something that is interesting about sort of how that relationship developed? Obviously, yeah, he does seem like he's a very committed and involved leader in this process. So was it easy to be able to follow him, or did you have to like coordinate that closely with him, or how did that end up working?
I would say both. There's always in documentary, I'm sure you know, there's always a level of patience you have to have trying to chase down people you want to meet. So I found it was easier just to kind of grab them at events and talk to them.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's a handy skill for a documentary filmmaker to be able to think on your feet, for sure. Obviously, ultimately, you ended up following these characters for 5 plus years. Did you have a sense from the get-go that it might be such a long haul, or was that just a function of, the legal case kind of taking a while to move through the court system?
I think the answer to the question is twofold. Um, Meeting them and Diane and talking with her a lot um, as I was shooting, and then in post is where some of the time took, which is collecting hard drives from the community and people they'd hired to shoot events that I wasn't at, and collecting the name of the film and the song at the intro. All of those pieces took a long time for me to understand what I was looking for and what would make it seem more from their perspective and their voice than mine. So as I collected those hard drives, it certainly shaped, both with the editor Brenda Turning and I's view of how to tell their story, if that makes sense. So it was both, I think just there was so much research that I had to do just in understanding what, and patience, and I would say even meditating or praying to come up with the, I don't know, what to do. And I think I also said this before, but Diane's grace and tenderness and love really influence how the story is told.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think, I sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say that I think that intentionality really does come through, that sense of being immersed in the community's perspective. Does come through. But I'm sorry, I cut you off. So please, if you had another
I had
thought.
no idea it would take 5 years.
Fair enough.
But I think it's great that it took. I think it took as long as it needed to become the film that it is. So.
Yeah, I couldn't help but wonder as well whether some of the length of this journey is a function of how the sort of goalposts in this dispute seem to keep shifting, right? It feels as though in stories like this, we're used to maybe seeing a group that is campaigning for an assessment that will establish that a project has a harmful environmental impact, or maybe they're trying to show that it'll cost more than has been projected, and maybe they're hoping to convince a political party to take up the cause, and when that party wins, they'll put a stop to the project. But here it feels like all of those things have happened and it hasn't made a decisive difference. What was it like to be witness to that journey, in that sense of the goalposts always moving? Or is that sense even what you sensed on the ground as the story was taking shape?
I would say that during the filming, when the project does go under review with the BCUC, that's the British Columbian Utilities Commission, and then also there was a takeover in government to the NDP with John Horgan, who supported the stopping of the dam. I think they did get that report that it's damaging to the environment and also fiscally, and then John Horgan, when it goes through, when that false hope is, when that, what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like a false narrative climax, right? You think,
yeah.
I think it was really difficult for a lot of people to want to keep fighting, filming, participate. Some people that I had talked to or worked with that don't make it into the film just were too devastated to keep doing it. So it has an impact when you're thinking about people's rights, Canada. Why do people protest? Why do they get so angry? Well, this is why. Because even if we try to go through the appropriate channels and there's no logic behind it, it's still a perpetuation of the abuse of our rights to exist, human rights in Canada. I think, yeah, it's it's devastating. It takes a long time to process, and how do you show that that complexity without um, pointing a finger at people, because nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants to listen to that. So um,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that is really well said. I think it's hard to again see all of these shifting goalposts as I keep repeating and not feel that sense of frustration and as though you are trying to exhaust all of the appropriate official channels and yet it all goes against you. So what else are you meant to do? Did it surprise you to see that really quick about face from Horgan's government once they came into office, and how swiftly they seemed to accept the dam, having campaigned on a promise to halt it?
uh, I guess it would seem cynical to say no, it didn't surprise me, because even as he says his own words, I'm not the first person to stand up and disappoint First Nations people. So
Mm,
um, often word it's like an afterthought to a decision. Sometimes it feels like, and so and the history of dam building in Canada is to do it and then apologize after, and it's cheaper to
mhm.
pay any lawsuits out afterwards. So I think there's a precedent of this behavior, and so um, you just would hope, especially when there's such a move for acknowledgement of, even with the Truth and Reconciliation and stuff, that maybe politics would join up. But I think things take longer than we think for changes of um, politics, big business, stuff like that. It's still way back here.
Mm. Yeah, I was actually curious as to whether, we've touched on the fact that this project has been in the works for some time, but I don't know whether it's fair to say, it might not be fair to say, perhaps for some Canadians and maybe not so much others, but I feel like conversations around reconciliation have kind of entered a new space over this summer, especially following the discovery of the mass graves at the residential schools, which is something that is the residential schools obviously are touched on in the film. Um, I'm sure many Indigenous communities are skeptical that settlers will really ever truly embrace reconciliation wholeheartedly. And I think that skepticism is well founded. But do you know if there's any sense from Diane or Chief Rowland, if you've kept in touch, as to whether support for their cause has sort of grown at all in the wake of this summer? And is there any sense in which settlers are seeing issues like respect for Indigenous treaty rights with a greater weight or urgency? Is that, I don't know if that's a naive question, but I'd like to think maybe, but I
Well,
don't know.
I mean, that is sorry, it's one of the reasons I made the film. So hopefully it does have impact in support for them, and for maybe explaining a bit of treaty, and giving a bit of context to um, what it's like on the ground. But I think that there's so many films coming out right now by other Indigenous filmmakers that are really touching on these subjects. And I think, I don't know, I think that a lot of our films are coming from also a place of, this doesn't sound dumb, but from love, where we're trying to show our stories, but we're not trying to do it so angrily. We want to be heard.
Mm,
And um, I think it's also just when you're telling these stories, it's about sharing knowledge.
mhm.
Because a lot of people who come to the table maybe just don't even know where to start the approach. And so I think that these films that are coming out are going to be great for that conversation.
Mm.
I mean, education wise, I'm not sure how old you are, Julian, but I'm in my 40s. There certainly wasn't any education about this stuff when I was in school.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I also lacked a lot of education in this area growing up, for sure.
So I think there's a lot of stuff that we're all trying to do um, collectively for healing is understanding what needs to be understood with the stories recorded during the Truth and Reconciliation and the actions, call to actions they've put out, and then stories. I mean, the easiest way to change hearts is to relate to them with story, universals, values, fights for things that we all need, like water,
Hmm.
community strength. And I think even in this film, there's a show of reconciliation on the ground between the farmers and the First Nations. So I think if you think about what change comes from, it's often on the ground with grassroots, with love, with sharing, with fighting with each other. So there's when you, or I guess it's horrible to say, but when you're coming together over a trauma, which is to lose the Peace River,
Hmm.
that shared experience can cause a lot of strength to come, resilience with each other to make change is a good, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I'm trying.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I know that this film is just beginning its journey. You had your premiere just at the beginning of the month, but have you had any responses as yet? Is it too early to kind of get a sense of the impact that the film might be able to make?
I think I, from what I see, it's all been really positive, and I think that the team I had, the editor and the producer, Ava Carvin, on that I brought on, we've really taken this film beyond my expectations to a level of art and excellence that I couldn't have even thought of at the beginning. So I certainly hope that with all the help, even this interview with you, all these festivals, really, it just helps shift perspectives.
Well, that's certainly part of our mission and why we want to show films like this.
Yeah, it's
Um, I noticed at the end of the film there was a reference to Raven Trust, which is an organization that is helping in the fight against Site C. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about Raven and maybe how they could support?
yeah, there's been a lot of campaigns to raise money, as I show in the film, if you watch it. But ultimately, if you go to www.raventrust.com and you scroll through the page, there'll be a section called Site C, and you can donate to the legal fight. So that's what they say. Like in the movie, Roland talks about how we're not going to lose because we're wrong. We're going to lose because we can't
Hmm.
afford it.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so definitely, if you feel compelled after you watch this film, please go ahead and donate.
Is that the most effective way, or sort of the most direct way that people who are remote from the community but want to support can do so, or are there other avenues that whether it's, again, I don't know how responsive politicians are at this point to letter writing campaigns and so on, but are there any other avenues through which people who've just watched the film and want to become involved might be able to do so?
Yeah, I think if you just type in hashtag Site C, you'll see a lot of the things out there to support it. There's a lot of Facebook pages, a lot of tweets, and then I haven't actually thought about it much beyond the Raven Trust, but I know that Amnesty International has been involved in this fight. I think letters of support to Moberly Nation, West Moberly, are always welcome, and always like energy with your well wishes,
Mm.
thoughts.
Mm.
But yeah, for me, if there's any back end on this film, which you never know, I would, percentage of it for me would be going to the West Moberly Nation, just in reciprocity. So
Amazing. Maybe just to kind of begin to close things.
yeah.
I I understand that there was a development in the legal case in the spring where I think some documents were made available to the West Moberly campaigners. Can
Yeah.
you maybe just bring us up to speed a little bit on what's happened since filming wrapped and sort of where the case is now?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that have been really important. Blueberry First Nations from the area have also won a case. I'm not very familiar with it because I didn't do a lot of research, but
Mhm.
they're also in the same predicament where there's a lot of development, including the dam that interfere with their way of life, which is part of the treaty. Um, and then Site C, for whatever reason, has been very secretive about where they're at in the project, how much money they're spending. Um, but they have now been court ordered to release the information to West Moberly's legal, sorry,
Mhm.
defense, I
Right.
guess,
Yeah.
sorry.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's really important for them to have that information to make a case. So
Right.
like BC Hydro basically can violate their treaty because they said it's for the good of it's for the greater good. And so to
Mm.
have that information in their arsenal to look at what BC Hydro has actually been up to
Mhm.
can really help them defend their treaty rights in court
Right.
by saying,
Yeah.
well, actually, this is a terrible project. Here's their own work to show
Mm.
that. So hopefully
Mhm.
that helps them in court.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't an awful lot of evidence for the greater good that I saw
Yeah, it's
uh,
very
in
logical.
the film. So, yeah, be very curious what they might have to say for themselves. Um, do you know where, if people see this film at PIF and they want to, recommend it to other folks, do you know where it will ultimately be available to viewers? Has the distribution kind of been finalized as yet?
Yes and no. Definitely this will be on APTN in the future, but its final resting home will be on the National Film Board
Oh
website
wow,
under the
awesome.
telefilm streams. This was funded by Telefilm Talent to Watch, so that's the contract they made. I think that'll be in a while, but distribution wise, this film will be playing also here at Planet in Focus, St.
Mhm.
John International Women's Film Festival, the Edmonton International Film Festival, and then we'll be looking at a theatrical run and an impact producing run. So
Awesome.
yeah,
That's great to hear.
yeah.
Um, Maybe then, just as a last word, is there anything that I haven't touched on yet that you wanted to express, or yeah, I just want to make sure that I haven't missed anything that you wanted to touch on.
I'm not sure. I think I'm just really happy to be here and to have people watching this story. Very excited to, yeah.
Well, as I say, it's our pleasure, and really, the thanks are yours. It's again, it's a really important film, and I think makes a really powerful case. So just gratitude to you for spending 5 years and doing the work, building the relationships, doing the research to tell the story. So thank you.
Awesome.
And thanks for tuning in. We hope that you're able to enjoy some other films at PIF this year.